Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of college writing. I hope you're all doing fabulously. I hope the COVID is not bothering you too terribly. Please, please, please. I know overprotective professor annoying, but please be careful with these underground Oktoberfest parties just because of the COVID thing, all right? COVID has been exploding everywhere. The long-term effects of it, even on young people, are unknown, and some of the information we're getting back is not great. So we still want to be careful of the COVID. So please, please, please be careful. Wear your mask, etc., etc. So, all right, overprotective teachering over. Let's talk about class business. Peer review. You guys should have done your peer review. I checked a little bit. I didn't hear back from many people. I heard back from a couple people with issues. We got those worked on. So I'm hoping that most people got that through without a hitch. If you didn't, let me know and we'll figure something out. All right. So you've got your literacy narrative due in a week. Take those comments. Take those comments that were due last night. Read them. Use them. Remember, like we talked about last week, you don't have to fix what they tell you to, and you definitely don't have to fix it in the way that they tell you to, but you do have to take their comments seriously enough to say, ask yourself, okay, is this comment right? Did I do something wrong that would make this clearer, etc., etc.? So that's due in a week. Also, the other video this week is your op-ed. This is your next assignment. I know that we're still processing the literacy narrative, but as happens in college, we've got to start writing one thing while we're doing something else. So we're going to start talking about the op-ed of the other video today. This is a much shorter assignment, so we'll see how it goes. All right. Also, you guys should be starting to read the case for reparations. This is a very long article. It's about 50 pages long. It's wonderful, so I want you to read it. The discussion for that week will be around the case for reparations. You need to be prepared to talk about it. I am not going to do my normal thing where I'm like, hey, let's chat, and then everyone's silent, and then I bring up something. This discussion is about you and what you're thinking about the persuasive tactics being used. That's really what this whole lecture today is on persuasive tactics. So I want to read the case for reparations with that in mind. So we are moving from our first kind of writing process, the shitty first draft. We're moving to some theoretical ideas about arguments. Academic writing, and most writing, but especially academic writing is argumentation. All academic writing is about making an argument. You are saying in some way, shape, or form, here is what is happening, here is what I believe, here is the explanation for this science experiment. Everything you're doing here is about argumentation. You are making an argument, and you are supporting that argument with appropriate evidence for the genre. All right. Now, an argument is a coherent series of reasons, statements, or facts intended to support or establish a point of view. The point of view is your thesis. That's essentially your answer. That is your final, here's what the solution is, here's what I believe, etc., etc. An argument is everything around that, building up to that. All right. So, an argument uses supporting evidence, and the supporting evidence looks like this, right? An argument is a claim, right? The opinionated statement you wish to defend. Soup is terrible. That's my claim. Soup is terrible. My claim will then be supported by supporting evidence. Supporting evidence is used to defend and explain your claim, right? Every time I eat soup, the top of my mouth burns, and it's terrible. Not great evidence, but evidence nonetheless. So, I make a claim, I support it with evidence. Your arguments will typically be a large claim, and then they will be followed by smaller supporting claims. Every claim has to have supporting evidence. That is key. Every claim must come with one at minimum, multiple is better, pieces of supporting evidence that prove that claim. So, when we're talking about persuasion, we're talking about something that some of you might remember from high school, some not. It seems to be about 50-50 whether people got this particular part in English class or not. All right, but it's super important when thinking about argumentation, because your point with writing an op-ed, with writing any argument, is to persuade. And centuries ago, right, Aristotle thought about how arguments happen, and he figured out that basically there are three and only three main ways of appealing to someone. Three categories by which a human being is convinced of something else. When you understand that, when you understand that there are really only three basic categories of how to persuade someone, you can craft an argument that uses all three to help support your argument so that what you're saying becomes almost indefensible, hopefully. Or not indefensible, that's wrong. Becomes unassailable, that's the word. So, these three appeals are pathos, ethos, and logos, all right? I want to start with logos because in many ways logos is the easiest to talk about. Logos is logic, right? Logos is using data and facts to and logical thinking. We're going to talk a lot in the next couple of weeks about different methods of logical thinking, but logos is using facts, data, and logical argumentation to make your point. All right. Here's tips from this former smokers campaign. All right. 1.6 smokers tried to quit. Right. 300,000 years of life were added to the U.S. population because people quit long enough to add years to their life. 6 million people, 6 million non-smokers talk to family and friends about the dangers of smoking. So you've got this thing here. It's an advertisement basically talking about, don't smoke. Here is how we convince people not to smoke, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're looking at this and it's got some good data. 1.6 million smokers tried to quit. That is hard data. 300,000 years of life were added to the U.S. population. That's pretty substantial data. I mean, that's like some powerful number data right there, right? 6 million non-smokers talk to family and friends. Data, data, data. Here is the annoying part of being human. A human should be persuaded. We should be convinced by science and math and data. We should be convinced by logic. And when we sit down and really force ourselves to think about it, we are persuaded and convinced by data. But data and logos it's boring. It's boring. It grabs us on an intellectual level, but not on an emotional level. And humans are largely persuaded by emotion, not logic. Logos is massively important. You've got to prove that you're making a logical argument. But you also have to understand that logos alone will not convince many people because we are emotional creatures. We are driven by emotion. Right? Here's another example of logos. This is the most standard, I would say, in terms of advertisement discussing of logos. Sale 50% off. This makes logical sense. If they have something that you've been wanting to buy and they're selling it for cheaper than they normally do, it is logical that you would want to buy that thing. So any kind of buy one, get one free, any kind of ad, coupon, anything like that, that is a logos argument. All right? All right. Here is another example of logos. All right? This is what is called a syllogism. A syllogism is almost a mathematical form of argument. All right? It starts with a broad proposition. It moves on to a specific proposition, and then it combines the narrow and the broad to form a conclusion. Here is one of the most famous examples from Socrates. My apologies to them. All right, all humans are mortal. This is a broad and widely believed to be true statement. Garcia is a human. I am a human. That's my specific example. So I've got a broad claim, all humans are mortal. Then I've got a specific piece of information. Garcia is a human. Therefore, Garcia is mortal. All right? It essentially breaks down like this. A equals B. B equals C. Therefore, A equals C. All right? You didn't know you were going to get math today, but it happened. All right? So look at all humans, A, are mortal, B. Garcia, C, is a human, A. So you've got A equals B, and then you've got C equals A, Garcia is mortal. C equals B. All right? If you could do a syllogism right, it is one of the most unassailable forms of logic there is. It's It's almost impossible to argue this, right? So you're going to notice syllogisms happen all the time in argumentation, right? You've also got what in logic is called a preponderance of evidence. And here's my quote. We have a DNA evidence, a confession, 3 witnesses, and a video of the crime. The dude is guilty. It is logical that when you have many pieces of evidence, all of which point to one solution, one answer, that answer is correct. So having evidence, lots of evidence from multiple perspectives, all of which lead us to the same conclusion, is logos. Right? Logos from literature. Now here is a line from To Kill a Mockingbird. All right? And here is the argument. This is a quote from To Kill a Mockingbird. The state has not produced one iota of medical evidence to the effect that the crime Tom Robinson is charged with ever took place. It has relied instead upon the testimony of 2 witnesses whose evidence has not only been called into serious question on cross-examination, but has been flatly contradicted by the defendant. Right? So, this is building up a legal, logical argument. There's no medical evidence. The only evidence is witness testimony, and those witnesses have been shown to be unreliable. This is in addition to the fact that the perpetrator of the crime swears they did not commit it. So, logos occurs even in fiction, all right? Because remember, fiction is still trying to persuade us. Fiction is trying to persuade us to believe the world, to believe the motivations of the characters, and that means that the motivations of the characters have to be logical, right? Now, the opposite of logos, although working jointly, is pathos. Pathos comes from the same root as the word passion. So pathos is emotion. This is the hardcore emotional response. And advertisers know, the next time you watch commercials or look at a magazine ads, notice how illogical so many advertisements are. Because advertisers know and are trained to know that people are far more influenced by their emotions than they are by logic. So look at this. Look at this advertisement here for Coca-Cola. It's a beautiful field. It's sunny. It looks warm. There are 2 people at least hanging out, because you got the hand here and then you got the person here. So people are enjoying themselves in the sun. It's bright, it's shiny, and there's a note that says open a Coke, open happiness, right? And we look at this and we're like, oh, this looks wonderful. It's bright, it's sunny, they're hanging out with friends. I want to do this. And that emotion that you feel, if this ad can connect that wonderful emotion with Coca-Cola, you are very likely to buy a Coca-Cola. And that's what they're trying to do, all right? So the next time you're feeling like you want to have a great time and you think subconsciously about the emotions in this ad, you start to crave a Coke. That's how this works. And again, notice, we as humans say we want to be logical people. We pretend to want to be logical, but really, when we get down to it, we are swayed by emotion. One of the strongest emotions advertisers use is sex. Look at this thing. This does not make sense. Tom Ford, menswear, women's wear, beauty, eyewear, the brand. They're selling clothes and beauty supplies. They're naked. They're not even using the supplies that they're supposed to be participating in. But they're 2 attractive people. They're naked, and what, as an audience, we're supposed to do is be like, I want to be attractive and naked with other attractive people. Obviously, I should be using Tom Ford, all right? So, sex, lust is a powerful, powerful motivation that gets used all the time in advertisement to persuade, all right? Sometimes to ridiculous and obscene degrees. Look at this Burger King ad. This is an ad that ran in normal newspapers, normal magazines. And it is, explicit. So, sex and lust is not the only emotion, though. Fear is a massive one. Politicians use fear a lot. I force you to watch one of the debates, not the first one. There's one this week that we're not watching that one. It's coming up, but I'm forcing you to watch one of the presidential debates because we're going to look at the argumentational styles of both of the candidates. You're going to notice that both of them are going to use fear a lot in order to kind of make their case. This meth PSA, public service advertisement, is using fear to get us to not smoke meth. It's basically saying if you smoke meth, your mouth is going to look like this. That mouth is disgusting. Therefore, be afraid of smoking meth because your mouth could look like that. Right? Fear, horror, disgust, any strong emotion can be used to kind of sway an audience. All right. Pity, that's a big one. All right. Pity, we look at this ad for water aid. Fresh water found here. We take it for granted. It could be, but it simply wasn't. All right. So again, we feel sorry for this person. We want to contribute to water aid because of this kid and their problems. We want to help. We feel pity. We feel compassion. These are all emotions. Right? Now, again, emotions happen in fiction all the time as well. It is really important that when we're writing fiction or we're writing a story, that the reader emotionally connect with the story, emotionally care. All right, here's from Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. Believe me, my dear Miss Elizabeth, that your modesty adds to your other perfections. But you can hardly doubt the object of my discourse, however your feminine delicacy may lead you to dissemble. For almost as soon as I entered the house, I singled you out as a companion of my future life. As soon as I saw you, I loved you. And you were like, oh. All right, so emotion. We have to feel emotion in fiction, in nonfiction, because all writing is persuasive. And 90% of persuasion is emotionally connecting with someone. Now, of course, you've got to be careful. You can't, some people try. I'm not going to say you can't. It's a weak argument that only uses pathos, but it's also a weak argument that doesn't use any pathos, right? So your passionate ideas want to be, your passionate ideas, you want to convey them, but they've got to be grounded by a logical argument underneath, all right? If it's too emotional without any logic at all, we can see through it. Right? But if it's really emotional with a bit of logic underpinning it, works great. Here's another piece of pathos from poetry, Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rage at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. You can feel that power. You can feel that emotion. And feeling that emotion makes us care. There is one more. Right? There's pathos, there's logos, pathos, and then finally ethos. Ethos has a bit of a longer explanation. Ethos comes from the root ethic, right? And Socrates believed, when he started figuring this out, that the speaker of the argument had to be an ethical person in order for us to believe them. And when we're debating philosophy, this is especially true. Like we're not going to listen to someone tell us the meaning of life if their life is a dumpster fire. But we did figure out that it's not always about ethics. It's what it is about credibility, and that's what ethos is. Ethos is about credibility. Do you believe the speaker in what they're saying? A world-renowned surgeon could be the worst human being ever. Just a terrible, terrible person, right? An ethical nightmare. But if they're teaching you how to do a surgery, you would still probably listen to them because they're a world-renowned surgeon. You would not listen to them in terms of what's right or wrong in the world. But so again, ethics, we might still listen to an unethical person if they're telling us about an area of expertise. And they're doing it ethically, I guess. Tricky. But you would not listen to an unethical person talking about ethics. So it's got to be credibility. Advertisements use credibility all the time. For some reason, ads on like tooth care, like toothpaste, they really love ethos. Like, 9 out of 10 doctors think you should use this brand of of toothpaste. Now that works because we say to ourselves, dentists have strong credibility when talking about our mouth health. All right, and so because of that, we will listen to this. Although, look at this, the brand more dental professionals recommend, it doesn't tell us how much more they recommend it. And dental professionals is weird because that could be dentists, but it could also be like the secretaries who work in the office. So, you got to be careful about how ethos works. Sometimes ethos makes a lot of sense. Sometimes ethos doesn't at all. Right? Here's an old advertisement from the 50s where doctors are talking about how, smoking this brand is healthier than smoking that brand. It was all utter garbage. But still, in our brains, we're like, a ton of doctors said that this brand is healthier. This brand must be healthier. They have the credibility on health. Right? Celebrity endorsements get really, really weird. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio is an actor, a fine actor, but he doesn't hold a science degree. He doesn't hold any kind of job or rating in terms of assessing global warming or climate change or anything like that. So where's the credibility? The thinking is that this person is admired throughout the world. And if we admire Leonardo DiCaprio, then we will also admire we will also care about the things that Leonardo DiCaprio cares about, right? It's a little unfair. Leonardo DiCaprio has donated millions and millions of dollars of his own money to global warming research. And so, he probably does have some credibility there because he's like, I put my money where my mouth is. I spent the money. You should spend the money too, et cetera, right? Here's a more ridiculous one. Katy Perry talking about eating Katy Perry does not eat potato chips. Doesn't happen, right? Her kind of job is to be pretty and thin enough to do that. You can't eat potato chips. But you and I look at this ad and we're like, hey, I want potato chips. Katy Perry is pretty and thin. Therefore, this must be the kind of potato chip I can eat, right? So, ethos also works in fiction. Here's a little bit from F. Scott Fitzgerald saying, in my younger, more vulnerable days, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. Now look, this is weird. This is a fictional story. Neither the speaker nor the speaker's father exists. So, why on earth would F. Scott Fitzgerald decide that, he could have just said this. The character could have just said, whenever I feel like criticizing anyone, I try to remember that they haven't had the advantages I've had. But F. Scott Fitzgerald knows that when someone old says something, we tend to give it a little more gravitas. We tend to consider it a little more wise than, someone who is young and naive. And so F. Scott Fitzgerald uses ethos by making the father say this line, because the father saying that line gives us age, credibility, more weight, and makes us believe this more than we would if some just naive 20-year-old had blurted it out like would have happened if the character had just said it himself. Right? The best argument uses all of the appeals: pathos, ethos, logos. Most strong advertisements, most strong language, most strong op-eds use all of them. So look, here we've got Angelina Jolie advertising for milk. All right, you've got pathos. She is scantily clad. She is pretty. She is a well-known actress. So you've got ethos. You think you've got the milk mustache. So you think to yourself, she's really healthy and beautiful, and I want to be healthy and beautiful. If she drinks milk, I will drink milk because I can then be as healthy and beautiful as Angelina Jolie. Obviously, the logic there is flawed, but there we go. But also, look at this little thing right here. I love the logic here. 9 essential nutrients for my 1 essential body. 9 essential nutrients in milk. That's a logos argument. That's a logical argument. But look how small it is. Right? The logos is tiny, teeny, tiny compared to the overall ad, because they know that logos is important, but that logos is not what's ultimately going to change your mind. The ethos and the pathos are what's going to change your mind. Right? Now, there are other appeals. The other appeal I like to talk about, especially with politics, is an appeal called kairos. Kairos is the timeliness of the appeal. In other words, an argument is more or less convincing based on when you make it. The gun rights argument deals with kairos all the time. There's a school shooting. The people that are pro-gun control come out and say, like, hey, this school shooting shows that we need to be controlling guns better. And then the anti-gun control people come out and say, wait, we just had this tragedy. Let's mourn these victims. Let's not get caught up in emotion because this horrible thing happened. Let's give it a couple months and then come back and talk about it. So the kairos of the appeal. So when gun control people are arguing about that, they're arguing about kairos, the timeliness of the argument. Politicians are going to do that a lot. All right. I got to say, there's been a really weird argument between Trump and Biden. Like Trump is talking about Trump has a line that says something like showing images from places like Kenosha and saying this is Joe Biden's America, and that's a really weird form of kairos because it's actually Trump who's president right now, but we're trying to use it and use that to say this is what Joe Biden's America will look like all over the place. It's also kind of kairos. So, Mitch McConnell talks about the inappropriateness of gun control legislation, right? And that's again another form of kairos. Another way to think about kairos, you might not know who this dude is. All right. So this is an attempt at ethos, at a credible argument. All right. This famous guy eating puffed wheats means we should eat puffed wheats. But if most of us have forgotten who the celebrity is, the ethos fails completely. All right. This is Babe Ruth. So, right. Although other advertisements are utterly timeless, and there's never a time when we don't want Star Wars sneakers. So, all right. So, we talked about the appeals, the three basic ways that we convince people of something: pathos, ethos, and logos. All right, logic, emotion, credibility of the speaker. All right. So now we use those to make our claims, and then we use supporting evidence to back up those claims. All right. The idea of supporting evidence is vital in persuasive writing. It is supporting evidence is any kind of evidence, any proof that supports and agrees with your claim. Right. You want to cite that proof, but in an op-ed, in any kind of non-academic writing, the citation is not like a parenthetical endnote. Op-eds don't have parenthetical endnotes. We're going to get to that later when we do our visual analysis essay. So we're not doing parenthetical notes or anything like that. In an op-ed, the citing is just in the sentence. According to this report, comma, and then the evidence. My friend told me a story yesterday. The story, these are how to cite in an op-ed, right? Supporting evidence is in and of itself a form of ethos. You are giving yourself credibility in your argument by saying, look, I've got all of this evidence to support me. I have researched it. I have done my homework. You should listen to me, all right? So, supporting evidence is in of itself an important part of ethos, of your own credibility. All right. You should use supporting evidence anytime you present an opinion. And again, remember, the opinion is your opinion may involve a large opinion and then multiple supporting opinions. The large opinion and every supporting opinion needs its own supporting evidence. All right. So here's an example. I might make a claim. Bats are great. We should all love them. No supporting evidence. There's nothing behind it. There's no reason for me to agree with you. Right? But then I say, all right, bats are great. According to batrescue.org, bats can eat 1,000 mosquitoes an hour. Without them, we would not be able to see for all the mosquitoes flying around. We should all love them. That is a proper way for a claim and supporting evidence. I've made a claim. Bats are great. I've immediately followed that with supporting evidence that explains in a both logical and emotional sense why my claim is correct. Right? Another example. Election day should be a national holiday. So all right, you've got data and statistics backing up with the bat. All right, that eats 1,000 mosquitoes an hour. That's a powerful piece of logical data that we can manipulate for our emotions and bring in, right? Ethos. Election day should be a national holiday since elections are so important. No supporting evidence. Right. Election day should be a national holiday, according to Senator Bernie Sanders. In America, we should be celebrating our democracy and doing everything possible to make it easier for people to participate in the political process. Right? Now, whatever side of the political divide you fall on, Bernie Sanders is a credible speaker in terms of government, all right, and dealing with government. So, I have used the credibility of Bernie Sanders' ethos to support my claim that Election Day should be a national holiday. All right? Personal experience. People often move away from personal experience in op-eds, and you shouldn't. Your personal experiences, things that have happened to you, can be very, very powerful pieces of supporting evidence. Now, you don't want to use personal evidence in an academic paper, but an op-ed is not an academic paper. We are dealing with larger ways of persuading people. So don't move away from your own experiences. So I say, I believe all students should be required to take a year of theater arts in high school. Well, that's wrong. There's no supporting evidence. Here's my supporting evidence. It's a personal story. All students should be required to take a year of theater arts in high school. My friend Max could never speak in front of a group. Then he took theater arts, and now he looks forward to presenting to the class. So, personal story used as evidence to support my claim. All right? There are 6 basic, and this is really broad, all right, but there are 6 basic types of supporting evidence that we use in our argumentation. 1, personal experience. 2, data statistics. 3, expert opinion. 4, literature. One of the reasons that your degree, no matter what it is, forces you to take a science class and a math class and an English class and a history class is because the goal of that is you becoming a smarter, more well-rounded person, and you having a base of supporting evidence that you gain from reading books and reading history and understanding math, right? That you gain this supporting evidence for all of the claims that you will go on to make in life. That is the point of a liberal arts education. So literature, if you say something like, do not be greedy, right? And then you talk about Macbeth, this greed leading to his death. That is a wonderful supporting example of don't be greedy. Literature can provide a lot of supporting evidence, especially for philosophical and emotional ideas, right? The same with pop culture. Don't just use like fancy novels. Sports, I always forget about sports, but sports, television, comic books, video games, all of these are pieces of supporting evidence that we could use, all right? History, same thing. History are just stories of the world that we use to kind of figure out our own moment in time. And then current events and politics. What's happening right now in politics, that's important, all right? So personal experience. Cricket is a national sport of India. I had to watch a cricket game when I lived in India, and someone explained it to me, and just sitting around and watching these people go get crazy about cricket pretty much proved to me that cricket is the national sport of India. Data and statistics. Many people see this year's midterm election as pivotal in the role of the country. In Texas, early voting among young voters has increased by 477% from 2016. So, data, an increase in early voting among young voters, all right, is used to make a claim about the how people are viewing the political race. Expert opinion. You should learn to trust our feelings more than we do. According to clinical psychologist Mary Lamia, PhD, our feelings are designed to motivate us to pay attention to what's important in terms of what is harmful or beneficial to us. So we say something like trust our feelings, and then we say, look, this is a doctor. She's a clinical psychologist. She's got a PhD. Her job is to be a psychologist in a clinic. She studies this. That's what a clinical psychologist does. So all of this like information about her expert opinion gives her ethos, gives her credibility, and that backs us up. I would also say that when we're talking about academic writing, the two kinds of support we're basically looking at are data and statistics and expert opinion. Literature. It is surprisingly simple for a person to shut down due to indecision. The entire plot of Hamlet revolves around his inability to decide if he should murder his uncle in order to avenge his father. Right? So again, the stories in literature become stories that we can use as supporting evidence. All right? Maybe don't get married in a rush at 15. Romeo Juliet. Pop culture. There is always a tension in America between the country we are and the country we should be. In the comic Civil War, Captain America, the symbol of the best that America can be, finds himself in conflict with the American government because the ideals of our country do not match with its reality. Right? So, again, pop culture, it's a comic book. Right? The Civil War comic book series is much different than the Civil War movie, but just FYI. Anyway. But even though it's pop culture, comic books, etc., they can be used as evidence to prove our claims. History. The contributions of female scientists have long been overlooked when analyzing the history of science. Astronomer Professor Dom Jocelyn Bell Burnell discovered radio pulsars, but it was her male colleagues who took her data who won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1974. Right? So a couple of years ago, they basically she was gifted with $3 million as an apology for not winning the Nobel Prize because it was given to the men instead of her, because she's the one that actually discovered the pulsars. Current events. Voter suppression of minorities remains a problem in the U.S. That's my claim. All right, then a current event is my proof. Recently, the Supreme Court upheld a North Dakota law requiring street addresses, not P.O. boxes, when registering to vote, despite the fact that First Nations tribes people live on reservations and are only issued P.O. boxes by the federal government. In other words, there are no street addresses on many reservations. And so if you pass a law saying you have to have a street address, First Nations tribe people can't vote even though they're qualified to. So, finally, as we wind up about supporting evidence, be really, really careful. You must avoid hypotheticals. Imagine how many calories you would burn doing the Watusi. That's why dance is wonderful exercise. No. There's no data. There's no proof. There's no reality behind imagine how many calories. You need to do the research. You need to find out how many calories burns. You need to use the specific evidence. Don't do hypotheticals. All right? So, there we go. That's it for this week. I hope you have a fabulous, fabulous week. Once again, we will do on Tuesday a class, if you're interested, during class time, that will substitute for your online discussion if you participate. I hope you have a great week. Let me know if you need anything. Bye.